In 2015, Valve released the controller that they thought was the ultimate bridge between controller users and mouse and keyboard users. Acclaimed by a few, rejected by most, it represented an attempt to bring PC gaming to the living room that they would later succeed with in the form of the Steam Deck. This handheld device has created a blueprint showing Valve how to win the hearts and mind of PC gamers outside of the traditional PC gaming desktop. Not just handheld gaming, but controller-based gaming as well. Time will tell if they succeed in the living room and your eyeballs in VR, but today I am ready to pass judgment on the Steam Controller 2026, the first salvo into the new Valve hardware ecosystem, and you're not going to want to miss this one. Stick around.
Let's go into the Bonboro world.
Controllers are a crazy business. The PC elite recoil from them like Cleopatra from the asp. Console peasants simply accept them for what they are, the only real conveyance to their gaming library. But there are a handful of people like me, and presumably you, that prefer to use a controller on a PC rather than a mouse and keyboard. Or at least curious if such a device could really make PC couch gaming a reality without compromise. Today, the Steam Controller 2026, a piece of hardware that could change your mind about the possibility. When we speak of the Steam Controller, I want to be clear in the context. The controller is just half of the product. The other half is Steam itself, in any conveyance it is delivered. That means Steam Deck, Windows, Linux, anything that can run Steam or SteamOS. We'll be focusing on Steam running on Windows 11 LTSC to be specific, and gaming specifically. As with many controllers, the Steam Controller has multiple ways of connecting to your devices. The most widely shown in videos is the puck, a cable-tethered USB-C dongle that acts as a charging base and a 2.4 GHz transmitter. This is how Valve intends you to use it. However, you can, of course, plug it in as a wired solution to your device, which removes any possible interference, something we're going to cover later. This will also allow you to keep playing on a dead controller battery, which Valve claims has a 35+ hour playtime between charges. Considering how convenient dropping the controller on the puck is, much like the small footprint Xbox Elite controller base, you're likely not to be without charge in a traditional desktop environment like mine. As an almost obligatory addition, and to cover as many bases as possible, Bluetooth 4.2 minimum, but 5.0 is recommended, is available as well, which might open up its uses to non-mainstream devices or in systems you just don't want to plug anything into. The puck solution is rated at 8 milliseconds end-to-end with 4 milliseconds polling rate. Now, as with all specs and claims, we'll assume that this is under ideal conditions. In previous videos, I mentioned that the magnetic part of the puck wasn't what I would call super strong, and many of you called me out by saying I must have just got a bad one or something because yours is super strong. Fact is, I have two Steam controllers, and they are both identical, so I don't think I have one that's off. One of you said you could pick up your controller with it, and yes, in the right scenario, you can. However, it is very easy to break the connection with a lateral or diagonal pull. Yes, we want it to break away cleanly if you lift it off the desk in a hurry, but this isn't 100% there. It's very easy to break the pogo connection by putting it down where the wire might be slightly lifted. The recess of the pogo pin connection itself is genius, and this is no deal killer, but you expect transparency from this channel, and I'm going to give it to you. We're going to put each of the three methods to the test later. Let's continue with physical characteristics. If you're coming from an Xbox controller pretty much of any generation, you're going to find the size and weight very comparable. However, you're likely to be a bit more shell-shocked by the controller rearrangement on the face. Of course, Steam Deck users, you're going to be largely at home here, as most of the changes started on the deck before making their way here. The biggest changes are to the D-pad location and the left analog stick. PlayStation peeps might enjoy the inline analog stick configuration, but I do not. I didn't like it on PlayStation, and I don't like it here. I know, but Shane, you say the Steam Deck has them inline and you love that. It works because your hands are much further apart, about 8.5 inches rather than 2 inches on the Steam controller. And while both the deck and the Steam controller's left thumbstick are roughly 2 inches off from the left, the distance feels further because the rest of your hand has to take angle to hit the other controls correctly. Regardless, you're going to need a period of adjustment on this one. The D-pad move impacts both deck and Xbox controller users, more the latter than the former, because it has been completely moved. For deck folks, it's been raised up slightly, which messes with your muscle memory a bit. We'll cover more why this isn't as big of a deal as you might think later, and for those that play a lot of fighting games or classic retro games with the D-pad anyway, this may be a welcome change for you. Oddly, PlayStation controller users may take zero issues with these changes. Let's talk about the sticks a bit. These feel almost exactly like the Xbox Series controller, and no, there is no way to control the tension like we can with the Elite controller. Many people brush this feature off like some sort of gimmick, but I can tell you, being able to adjust the tension independently is a much missed feature on controllers that don't allow it. If you don't understand now, never use a controller that has the ability if you don't want to be tarnished forever on the fact that it is hella useful. Now the trade-off, which almost anyone can get behind, is that Xbox sticks eventually drift. Hell, most controller sticks eventually drift. Hall effect ones notoriously resist it, but these are something even newer, TMR, or Tunnel Magneto Resistance. I could do a whole video on the differences, but let's say that TMR measures the angle of the magnetic field instead of the raw strength of the field. These should be higher precision and drastically reduced power consumers than the Hall effect. Both of these are wins in my book. I must issue a correction. I mentioned in another video that the analog stick capacitive touch was removed. This is not true. Both sticks retain the touch sensors, which you can pair with things like the Gyro. Always happy to be wrong when it works out in favor of the user. The start select buttons are also drastically moved for Xbox controller users, but are pretty much on par for deck users. But the travel distance is going to throw you a bit. They still feel like the weaker buttons of the bunch, something I called out on the deck too. But since they've held up just fine there, and these feel a little bit better, I think we're okay here. The face buttons are exactly where you want them. The B button takes a slight curve, but nothing like the deck, and overall the deck worked out okay, outside of some of the early adopter units. They feel exactly like Xbox buttons and aren't those annoying micro switches. Yes, I know some of you love those things, but I've never adapted. Most console controller users are accustomed to a big button dead center for bringing up menus in-game, and the Steam controller has this as well, but it is a multi-function button that we'll talk more about later. To stay with the Steam Deck and hence Steam OS motif, a 3-dot button appears between those trackpads, which you might consider something like a context or right mouse click. Again, something we're going to cover more later. On the top, we have the customary L1, L2, R1, R2 buttons, aka triggers and bumpers. The triggers are concave and smooth, not textured like many other controllers are. The triggers are deeper pulls than the Xbox controller or even the Steam Deck. Now this will be great for acceleration games like racers and flight sims, but since there are no trigger locks, God, I miss them. You will either have to get used to them or try to fix them in software, something we'll be looking at later. The bumpers fare much better. They feel clean and smooth, but not overtly crisp in actuation like the Xbox and Deck are. Those that use the trigger pull but finger roll the bumper technique, you can actually do that here. One of the things I never liked about the Steam Deck. This turned out to be less of a deal because I always route the bumpers to the rear buttons and stick clicks, aka L3 and R3 as well, mostly because the bumpers fail rather quickly on Xbox controllers in my experience. The USB-C plug for wired charging and play is also nondescriptly on the top, almost intentionally orphaned up there. On the backside, we have the puck connector recessed in, which is rather clever and helps hold the puck better. 4 buttons, 2 on each side, mirror the extra buttons found on the deck, although these are far more traditional and actually take a bit more pressure to actuate. No matter where you come from, Deck, Elite, Nintendo Pro Controller, these are going to require some getting used to. I've acclimatized pretty well. Someone asked me if the buttons are still reachable with other holding methods like claw or one finger per on the top buttons. Claw, you're out. Even with my big monster hands, my pinky may be able to hit the top button, but not super reliably. The one finger per method, you're fine. The pinky finger works, but you may not be used to it being part of your gameplay, and that will take some getting used to. Something I am asked every every single time I review a controller with rear buttons, every single time, is can they be programmed to do things other than controller key replacements? And I always have to tell them no. But Steam Input is the magic sauce that turns this on-par controller into something far bigger than you can see in a picture. And we'll get there, I promise. What you cannot see on the backside are the grip sense areas, one on each side. These are here to sense if you're gripping one side or the other. These need a whole section to talk about, so we'll move on. If you're coming from Steam Deck, the trackpads are nothing new for you. If you want to jump past this part, consult the timestamp on the screen now. Otherwise, let's indoctrinate everybody else. I've been in computing and gaming for over 40 years, and I've never seen anything exactly like the trackpads on the deck and on the Steam controller. I know what you're going to say. You've been using a trackpad for decades. There's nothing new for you here. It's just a mouse replacement and probably not a great one at that, right? Actually, no. The trackpads are so much more than you would find on a laptop or similar mouse replacement device. They're 34.5 millimeters by Valve spec sheet, which is just shy of 1.5 inches for my US viewers. There is one on each side and they operate completely independent of each other, which makes them nearly exponentially more useful. To say the trackpads have haptics would be doing them a huge disservice. Each trackpad has its own LRA haptic motor, and that LRA piece is important. That stands for Linear Resonant Actuator, and it offers a unique tactile feedback that I've only seen in one other place, the Nintendo Switch HD Rumble feature. This means if properly used, the haptic motor can make the area under the pad feel alive, like something is burrowing around under there. You Switch people, you know what I'm talking about. Remember when we went from cheap nonsense rumble motors and controllers that were just like on or off with no variation or intelligence, and we finally got that context-sensitive rumble? An evolution, isn't it, gentlemen? That's what this is. An evolution of haptics that you can't explain or even show in a video, but will blow your mind when you experience it properly for the first time. These trackpads can also act as clickable regions, meaning that the trackpad below the left analog stick, by default, becomes a D-pad. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, that opens some doors, and it does. More on this later. But this can ease the culture shock of the real D-pad being removed. If your muscle memory reaches your thumb down to hit the D-pad, you might actually get the result you want. It must also be said that the trackpads are detectable at being touched, as well as up to 10,000 units of pressure. Nope, I'm not kidding. Some folks say that the touchpads suck because they're going to inadvertently touch them during normal controller use. That is not an issue with me in the dozens of hours I've played. Just remember, they can always be shut off on a game-by-game basis or even reduced in sensitivity. All of these things, in conjunction with the magic of Steam Input, gives this controller an insane amount of power, usefulness, and configurability not seen since the OG Steam controller. The last thing from a physicality perspective is the rumble. There are two high-output LRA haptic motors in the grips for HD game haptics, including rumble. While they're fine, those with more aggressive controller rumble may be a little disappointed. Also worth noting that, like the Nintendo Switch that has the same features, you'd be hard-pressed finding games that use the HD part. I can only imagine a game like Plague Tale making use of them feeling like rats scurrying under the controller. Nooch. I know. What about Gyro? We're covering that separately. Patience. Physically speaking, the controller passes muster. Unless you have a more esoteric situation, most people are going to feel right at home here. Yes, there are some things to acclimatize to, no matter where you're coming from. This sort of surprised me as a deck user, but yes, even the beloved handheld owners will need to dial in a few things here. Do I wish there were trigger locks? God, yes. Do I wish there was tension control on the analogs? Yes, please. The ability to change out the stick toppers? Yes, sir. But these are things I'm living without now with my Xbox Series controller with the Armor Pro X attachment to get me PC Gyro. I do look longingly at my Elite controller from time to time, but these are things I can live without. I promised to talk about those Steam-centric button, the big Steam button and the 3-dot button found between the trackpads. What they do depends on what device you're on and what mode you're in. Sounds confusing? Totally isn't. If the controller is off, tapping the Steam button will turn on the controller. If the controller is on and you're in Windows or other UI-based interfaces, tapping that button will bring up Steam. Not to their store, which would have been a dick move, but to wherever it was when you had it last open. So really maximize and focus. Class act. If you're in Windows or other OS, double tapping the Steam button starts big picture mode. When in big picture mode, if you hold down the Steam button, you get a shutdown menu and, more importantly, a Steam button shortcut list of all the crazy stuff that you can do with the Steam button, plus another button on the controller. I'll put a list on the screen, but for those of you only listening, you can do things like simulate mouse movement, clicks, simulate a joystick mouse, change volume, simulate key presses like Enter, Tab, Escape. You can even do Alt-Tab. Nice. Remember we talked about being able to connect via puck or Bluetooth? The Steam button is instrumental in handling connections between devices, pucks, and Bluetooth. We'll cover that more with the full puck coverage. The three-dot button serves no purpose unless you're in big picture mode. If you are, this brings up the quick settings menu on the right. Familiar to Deck and Steam OS users, but probably not as useful on Windows as it is on the Deck. Be interesting to see if people come up with something similar to like Decky Loader for adding features to other versions of Steam not running Steam OS. Time will tell. To my knowledge, these buttons cannot be reassigned, at least not without a hack, I'm sure, and I bet the hack doesn't survive updates. If you know anything about this, please leave a comment below. Since this sort of relates to buttons, let's talk about the puck and clarify a few things I may have gotten wrong in other videos. Let's start with the total number of devices you can have. For pucks, you can have up to 4 connected at one time. I was able to run 2 pucks with no problem. Each puck can connect up to 4 controllers. So yes, even my simple math brain knows that you can have a total of 16 controllers at one time. There is a limitation of the controller though. Each controller has 2 wireless slots. Each one can be assigned a different puck. So 1 controller, 2 pucks, easily boot the controller into the left or right slot depending on which puck that slot is registered to. This means if you have 4 pucks scattered across 4 devices in your ecosystem, that controller can only be coded to 2 of them at one time. Probably not a big issue to normal people, but if you're setting up a lab of Steam devices, maybe have roommates with multiple devices, I can see things getting a bit chaotic. But you aren't hard fixed to those. You can always forget one of your slots and reassign it, but super easy connectivity, 2 pucks, wired, and Bluetooth on a per controller basis. Hope that's clear as mud. Now let's talk about Mr. Puck and its efficiencies. Everywhere you look, Valve recommends line of sight. Strikes me as strange. 2.4 gigahertz devices are desired over something like IR because you don't need line of sight. But then your old remote or 900 megahertz cordless phone wasn't trying to play against Widowmaker and Overwatch either. Now this gets a bit technical, so bear with me here. Signal strength of controller to puck is measured in decibel milliwatts. What you want is to be as close to 0 dBm as possible. If you have the puck connected to the controller, the signal strength is about negative 20 dBm, and Steam calls this excellent. 4 bars, right. Disconnecting the puck and moving it about 8 inches away can see that number jump to negative 35 or negative 45 just by holding that controller in your hand. That actually drops you down to good, or 3 bars. It's a bit concerning. Hitting negative 50 dBm will make the connection just okay, and 2 bars hitting 60 dBm is weak, or 1 bar. Research shows that anything above minus 70 dBm will show signs of degradation. But I'll need a comprehensive reproducible test before I'll rule on the range. Everybody's situation is going to vary anyway, so all I can do is give you the from where I'm sitting review. But I will say, put that puck somewhere isolated from noise, out in the open without anything between you and your couch for the best results. Gyro. Oh yes, gyro. Earlier I discussed the concept of not being able to really sell HD Rumble on a video because you sort of have to experience it for yourself, much like the entire Steam controller itself. But we do need to talk about the gyro and a pretty big negative that might impact you. Steam spec sheet says 6-axis IMU. That's just a fancy way of saying it knows exactly where it is in space and exactly how it's moving. 3 axes of rotation, 3 axes of movement. Bare minimum for a great gyro experience. So why should you care about the gyro? Now, God knows I ignored the hell out of it until a couple of years ago. Now I'll do anything I can to make sure I have it everywhere, and it does everything that I need it to do. When Gyro finally clicked for me on the Steam Deck while playing Overwatch, I did a comprehensive video on Gyro. Instead of retreading all of that here, I recommend you pause this video and check the cards and/or description and go watch that before continuing here. I know you guys hate when I do that, but this video will end up being 2 hours if I don't start farming out a little. It's under 9 minutes. It'll help. All right, I hope you actually watched it. Gyro augmented aiming is what I personally use Gyro for, but there are other possibilities. You could completely replace the right stick with Gyro, depending on the game. There are mouse games that might be really damn cool using Gyro instead of the trackpad. Think of something frantic like House of the Dead or other rail shooters. Obviously, anything emulated on Switch, wink wink, might benefit from this feature as well. Think about Wii pointer games. Think Super Monkey Ball. Damn, there are a ton of ways you can leverage this. Thanks to the extensive Steam input powers, you can pretty much do whatever you want, whenever you want. Now, one thing that I do have to talk about is that the Gyro and the rumble don't always make good bedfellows. If your rumble is turned way up and you're using precision gyro aiming, that rumble can interfere with the gyro. You may have to do a little tweaking back of your rumble or maybe turn it all the way off in some cases so it doesn't interrupt your gyro play. I only saw this in rare occasions, but it was worth bringing up. You want me to say these things, I'm going to say them. This is the right place to talk about grip sense. It is often used as an activator for gyro. Let me back up a bit. So gyro comes in two flavors, always on and activated. Always on is self-explanatory, and 100% there are uses for this. Activated is more about evoking the feature only when you need it. Imagine you're playing Call of Duty or some mill shooter. What do these games have? ADS, or aim down sights. These games go to great lengths to provide you with extra features like ADS sensitivity. When you're running around, your right stick has one sensitivity. When you aim down sights, they turn down the sensitivity for precision aiming. Once you clock the guy, you leave ADS, your right stick goes back to normal sensitivity. Gyro could be used the same way. You're all stick until ADS mode, usually holding down left trigger, and then the gyro kicks in for fast precision aiming. Bam, kill streak maintained. So in this example, the activator for gyro would reasonably be the left trigger. But that doesn't work for every situation. So Steam input, being godlike as it is, you can actually set what you want to have it activate. See, this is where a lot of controllers I've reviewed failed. They don't give you this, meaning the only way you can ADS is if you use the button that they choose, or from a short list that only makes sense for some of the games. When I said Nintendo's gyro sucks, it isn't the tech, it is the option of using it the way that you want. Grip Sense is a touch-based trigger, which, by the way, could be used for other stuff. Imagine triggering an ultimate with it. Both grips offer a capacitive test, the precision fully settable to avoid accidental activations. In this demo, I'm going to play Moira in practice range on Overwatch. I've set left grip to press Y, the key for her ultimate. As you can see, I no longer have to take my thumb off the right controller to hit Y. A quick squeeze of my left hand and her ultimate kicks off. Nice, right? Let's look at that again a little closer. Right, don't tell me you can't come up with the use for that. Used in conjunction with powerful Steam virtual menus and pop-up commands, this is a game changer. We'll talk more about virtual menus and such in the Steam input video. There's just too much to cover for this one. So what do you want me to say? It works well. You may need to dial in some sensitivity and configuration to your needs, but hey, the Steam controller is all about doing exactly what you want, when you want, where you want, and when you want it. That is worth the price of admission, in my humble opinion. 100% recommend this guy. If you have questions, leave them down in the comments below, and I will get to them as fast as I can. I gotta wrap this up. We still have several topics that make sense to separate from this one, namely a comprehensive look at Steam input. It deserves it, along with some crazy looks at powerful alternative input methodologies people have put together that will frankly blow your mind. Certainly blew mine. Listen, I gotta be straight with you for just a second. This is a humble channel. Nothing here was given to me for free. And there are 2 more very expensive pieces of Valve hardware coming that I want to cover for you. I'm not GoFundMeing you. I'm not asking for cash. What I'm asking is, if you got value out of this, share it. Comment, like it, sub if you haven't. Use the affiliate links. Watch just a little bit longer these videos. These little acts of kindness push this video to more people just like you. That's how this channel funds the next one. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for sticking with me through this whole thing. Thank you for voting on the format. You guys are genuinely the best. I'm Shane Armonroe. Take care, and we'll see you next time.